This just proves we're on the verge of something special in New York, as a new report has revealed Chris Drury's plans for some of the younger players on this team, and some details are going to have Rangers fans fired up. We're also going to break down some other updates as it pertains to the actual New York Rangers roster heading into next season. You're going to want to stick around for that. But before we do all of that and get into all of that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 77% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with the New York Rangers, this channel is built for blue shirt fandom, and this is the place to be for all your daily New York Rangers content. But Bret, let's get right into it. We have a new report, multiple new reports actually, and one of them is on Carey Terrence and some of the younger players on not just this team, but in the organization, in the system, that are going to be making their way up and taking a step forward to the pro level next season. Carey Terrence is an interesting one. Obviously, he was traded from the Anaheim Ducks for Chris Kreider, which I think was very interesting. A lot of people were not so high on that trade, of course, because we know the history, and we'll get to it later in the video about the Rangers and developing players. But I thought this was pretty cool in the article as well, that, you know, a lot has been made about the Rangers drafting really good players. They're great players that come into the organization, but they don't develop into everyday NHLers or NHLers that can make an impact. But obviously, development coach Jed Ortmeyer has been saying that, you know, Carey Terrence, I thought this was amazing, has a great attitude. He wants to be coached. You're never going to hurt his feelings, stuff like that. I think that that type of an attitude is very important in young players who are going to be making the jump to pro hockey. So, Bret, what do you think about this? I'm loving everything about this, but again, the cloud that hangs over the organization and all the fans' heads are, you know, you have to develop these players, and hopefully they're on their way to doing that with some of these guys, into everyday NHLers, and not just that, the higher end guys like a Carey Terrence and a Malcolm Spence, which we'll get to in a second. They have to come in and make an impact at the NHL level.
Well, Darius, I absolutely love this guy's attitude. You know, you can't teach that type of heart. You know, that's just something that that's an intangible, and he certainly has that. Not only that, but his teammate Malcolm Spence in Erie has that same type of attitude, which is certainly great to see from
Yep.
both of those players. They've got the will, they've got the want to. They might not be the most talented players, but they certainly have enough talent, and they combine that with their heart, with their desire to be great. And that's certainly great to see from Carey Terrence. The problem is that, you know, what you just alluded to right there is that the Rangers have had a difficult time developing these players, not only developing these players, but players who are even more skilled than a Carey Terrence of the world, than a Malcolm Spence of the world. You see a player like Alexei Lafreniere, Capo Caco, these former, you know, first overall pick, second overall pick type players were never able to reach their full potential, at least not yet. But I do love the attitude. And if Carey Terrence ever plans on being an impact player for the Blue Shirts down the road, that's the type of attitude you need under a Mike Sullivan led team, because Mike Sullivan is going to tell you how it is. He's going to be blunt and brutally honest. And if you can't handle it, if you're too sensitive, you're not going to last. You're not going to get that playing time that you're seeking out under Sullivan. There's no doubt about it. He's just going to be honest and said what needs to be said. That's why it's a great hire. The Rangers need that type of leader on the ice, off the ice. But there is certainly a lot to like when it comes to Carey Terrence. Darius, a two-way center, and he's got some good speed, and we're going to break it down a little further here throughout the video.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I had up on screen, I'll get to this in a second, actually, from Statboy Steven. But, you know, when looking at this, he's about a point a game player in the OHL, about roughly, just under, right? But again, it's his two-way game that I think is really attractive, and he can be a third-line center for this team. And in a trade for Chris Kreider, obviously not ideal, I guess, if you look at it, you know, one for one or on paper, whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, you have to continue to build up this team into the future and get guys that are going to play roles for this team. And Carey Terrence, again, from Statboy Steven, is an intriguing prospect, really good skater, solid two-way game, and above average forechecker. So I'm really excited to see what he's going to be able to do. I think he's going to be on the Hartford Wolfpack this year, so that's going to be interesting to see how that kind of plays out. Skates really well with the puck. Opens up ice for his teammates, all of these things. So is he going to put up like a monster amount of points? No, but he plays the game the right way, and a two-way game. And I think the Rangers are actually, from a couple players, and centermen in particular, are lacking that on the team right now. The other thing I wanted to bring up, because you brought up his Erie Otters teammate, Malcolm Spence, who was just drafted by the New York Rangers. He's making a real push, and some insiders think that he is making a real push to make Team Canada's World Junior team this coming season. That would be a huge step in his development to go there, possibly wear a letter as well, and put up some points on the world stage. I think that would be a great opportunity for him, and we will be keeping tabs on him if he ends up making the team. But any thoughts on this before we move on to some other crazy updates with the Rangers as well on, Carey Terrence, Malcolm Spence, and some of the other prospects?
Yeah, what better, practice for Broadway, for playing in the Mecca, the biggest stage in the world in New York, than playing on the world stage, like you just said, Darius. And this is a guy that there's a lot more players there that have more talent than Malcolm Spence. And I keep alluding to this, but it's that desire to be great, which you simply cannot teach, Darius. You cannot teach that type of attitude. And that's what I love about Spence, because he has the production to pair with it. This was an over 1 point per game player in Erie, a player that was also a point per game type of player in the playoffs. So he stepped up when it mattered most, preparing for that world stage like you just spoke about. And both of these players, in Terrence, in Spence, these players bring leadership qualities. You can't teach that either, that leadership. Both of them wore letters. Terrence wore the C and Spence wore the A for Erie this past season. I can certainly see both of these players making an impact on the Rangers here. I believe Malcolm Spence, although he's younger, it's actually crazy. I think he's about 3 years away from the NHL. He's only 18 years old, but he's filled into his body nicely, over 6 feet tall, over 200 pounds already. And he's still under 20 years old. But like I said, he's a two-way type player, and you could insert him right into a middle six role, and he could eventually elevate into a top six player. The difference with Carey Terrence, while I do believe he could be a good contributor for the Rangers, I don't see him cracking the top six in a few years. I can see Malcolm Spence cracking the top six, but I see Carey Terrence more as a bottom six type player, and there's nothing wrong with that. The Rangers have had problems with their bottom six for years, and it's been a big, Achilles heel for them. So certainly developing Terrence in the AHL, which we both expect to see him with the Hartford Wolfpack this year. It would be great to see both these players in a few years.
Absolutely. And Malcolm Spence, like you alluded to, is younger. So he has a little bit more runway right now. He's going to go back to the OHL. Hopefully he makes Team Canada. And then in a couple of years, I could see him in the NHL in a top six role, like you mentioned. Like, he has that skill. These are two different players that will play two different roles for the team. And I think that's totally fine. And the Rangers are in a great spot with that. The other thing I wanted to get to in this video as well is the Athletic Dom Lucian. Every year he releases his grades for certain contracts in every team, and some of the contracts for the Rangers are pretty absurd. You can see some of them, like Vincent Trocheck, B+. Not too many pluses here for the Rangers on offense, at least according to his model. A couple of them are a little ridiculous. You can see here on defense, Adam Fox, one of the best value contracts in the entire league, actually, if you look across all of them with this model. But you even have Igor Shesterkin at a C-, which I think is a little crazy for me. I have to be honest. I know it's based on a model from last year as well, and he didn't have the greatest year. I think a lot of that had to do with the defense. I don't know how you feel about that, Bret. But in terms of all of these contracts, I think there's some really surprising ones here. Will Cooley is an obvious one. It's a good grade, but you got JT Miller down there. I feel like, his point production, what he did when he came over to the team was really good. Panarin, maybe it was a down year for him, but what do you make of some of these ratings? Because I think some of these are a little absurd for the Rangers.
Yeah, just to start off with JT Miller, I mean, that C+ is just glaring. I can't believe it. JT Miller is an absolute stud, two-way type player, plays a 200-foot game. He's such a balanced, well-rounded player. He plays with that fire and desire that the Rangers have been seeking for a long time now. I believe he's going to be the future captain of the Blue Shirts. Not only that, but what people tend to forget about JT Miller is this is a guy, I keep talking about the postseason. I spoke about it with Spence, Garand, with Carey Terrence. Now I'm going to talk about it on an NHL level. JT Miller, when the postseason comes around, he steps up. He steps up on the biggest stage. His last 2 years when he was in the postseason with the Vancouver Canucks, this was a point per game player. The best player on Vancouver during those runs. And I really believe the Rangers will bounce back this year, will get into the postseason. And look, they're going to need JT Miller in the postseason if they're fortunate enough to get there. And I believe he will deliver because we've seen Artemi Panarin not deliver enough. We've seen Mika Zibanejad not deliver enough. But I believe JT Miller will deliver when the lights get brightest on Broadway. I truly believe that. And now talking about Panarin, I kind of, spoke bad about him there a little bit, but I do have to say this is a little bit strange. His grade here as a C. Say what you want about Panarin in the postseason, but when it comes to the regular season, I mean, there's not too many guys, Darius, even at his age, that are going to produce at the type of clip that the bread man does. This is a guy that since he joined the Rangers in 2019, there's only a handful of players that have put up more points in that span. And we're talking about the best of the best future Hall of Famers. We're talking about the Connor McDavids of the world, the Leon Draisaitl's, Nathan McKinnon. That's who we're talking about. Nikita Kucherov. Those four players have been more productive than Panarin since he's been a Ranger. What an incredible list to be on. I think a C grade. I'm not going to sit here and say he should have an A plus, but a C, come on. And when it comes to Igor Shesterkin, look, I get he's the highest paid goaltender in the NHL. I get that he's coming off a bad year, but if you ask me, it's the outlier. I know we've seen a decline in production since he won the Vezina Trophy, but this has still been a very, very, very steady goaltender in the National Hockey League. And you talk about a Connor Hellebuck, who is all world in the regular season, but then completely melts down in Winnipeg when it matters most. That's not the case when it comes to Igor Shesterkin. He steps up and keeps the Rangers alive in series that they have no business being in, and they do it and they survive because of Igor Shesterkin. So that grade ticks me off.
Yeah, me too, because I think that he's a lot better than this, and he was even last year. He won them games. Of course, the Rangers didn't make the playoffs last year, so we didn't get to see him in the playoffs, but he won them games in the regular season last season. And keep in mind, too, that it's based on a model, right? So when you're looking at guys like Vakanainen and even Schneider to a degree on these ranking systems, they were playing in more sheltered roles than guys like Gavrikov, who was playing against the best competition in the NHL every single night, right? So I feel like some of these are skewed a little bit, but nice to see Adam Fox with an A+ and one of the best in the league. That is for sure. That is a positive to take out of it. And a couple others as well. I mean, even a Vincent Trocheck and Will Cooley, who look like they're playing, not even up to their value, but above their value. And I'm excited to see what that fourth line for the Rangers does next year, because Adam Edstrom, when he was injured, I think the team was desperately missing him. Now, Stu Grimson, weighed in on where he believes things stand with the Rangers, and we'll end with this, Bret, pointing out the potential, but warning that it may take some time for everything to come together. And I feel like a lot of Rangers fans see this, that there are brighter days ahead, but probably not going to happen overnight. So any predictions for you for next season? I would predict that, again, it might not be the prettiest season. It might look ugly at times, but I do truly believe that the Rangers are going to be returning to the playoffs next season. But what are your thoughts on this? A lot of people tend to believe that, I've seen some optimism out there, but I feel like for the most part, there's a lot of pessimism in the fan base heading into next year.
Yeah, I believe they'll be in the postseason, Darius. Look, they won the President's Trophy 23-24, 13th in the Eastern Conference this past season. I believe they're somewhere in between, right? I don't see them winning the President's Trophy, but I don't see them being as putrid as they were this past season. So I see them laying somewhere in between, which is why I come to the conclusion that this will be a top 8 team in the Eastern Conference, at least on paper. I know last year on paper it looked the same way, but let's not forget the drama and everything that came along with it. Sullivan's not going to let that happen. He's just not going to let that happen. And let's not forget that the one area where he can truly mess this up is what we spoke about yesterday, Darius, not pairing Gavrikov and Fox together. You need to do that because what Stu Grimson is talking about from NHL Network, saying that he's not sure if it will happen overnight, but there are brighter days ahead for the Rangers. What he's alluding to is the fact that all these postseason teams, the Floridas, the Carolinas, the Dallases, Colorados, these teams have an identity. The Rangers don't have an identity. So they need to establish that DNA, that identity as quickly as they can. And what Sullivan needs to do, put Gavrikov, put Fox together, get that defensive first pair, on point. That's going to trickle down to Igor. He's going to improve. The power play is going to be better. The penalty kill is going to be better with Gavrikov. You need to establish that identity. The Rangers need to be a team that's effective, with their goaltender, obviously, but they need to be a team that gets back to their bread and butter when it comes to special teams. They need to do that, Darius. They were awful last season, and as you saw, 13th in the Eastern Conference, not great. So they need to establish their identity as quickly as possible because every postseason team, what they have in common is they have an identity. It's not just about the players. It really isn't. It is about having that DNA, and the Rangers need to find it.
I would agree that they need to find it as soon as possible, and also would agree that it probably won't happen overnight. But what will happen overnight, at least what I believe, is this team got better. Now, a lot of other teams took steps too, but I think this team did get a lot better. So I'm excited to see what they do this season because I do think, listen, I'm not saying they're going to finish first in the league, but I do think that they will return to the playoffs. So it's going to be interesting to see where they fall. But let us know how you feel in the comments because the conversation always continues in the comments. You can shout us out on X as well. Send us something, right? You can send us a message if you want as well, or even some content you want to see on the channel because, of course, it is the summer, but we're having a lot of fun covering everything that has been coming up. But let us know how you feel, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.